Hello and welcome to Ward Talk, CTN's look at the political scene in Ann Arbor. I'm your host, Bonnie Gabowitz. We'll be discussing issues and solutions with the City Council members from our 5 wards on the 3rd Wednesday of each month. Joining us is Chuck Warpehoski from Ward 5. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Bonnie.
And Chuck, it's been a while since you've been here, and lots has been going on. And this being the month of July, we're kind of rounding out the end of the summer, going into the fall. So let's just start with your Ward 5. I know there was one topic that we definitely wanted an update. So let's talk about what's going on with the problem with the plume that had been spreading, and I know this has been going on for years.
Oh, it's been decades.
Trying to get it cleaned up.
It's been a huge problem. And just to catch the viewers up, a couple of years ago, we've been fighting this issue, as you say, for years. Recently, the state updated their cleanup standards for when there's dioxane in drinking water supplies. And that change in the state laws has made it so that we were able to go back to the courts and re-engage with Gelman to push for a better cleanup. Now, they've been fighting us tooth and nail, and they've been trying to get the city kicked off the case so they wouldn't have to mess with us. So we had a big victory just this week when the Court of Appeals rejected Gelman's requests to get the city off the case. We're still part of it. We're at the courts trying to push hard for a better solution to the cleanup. We believe the cleanup they're doing now is not adequate. It doesn't adequately protect the safety of Ann Arbor residents. And so being able to stay there in the courts and push for a better cleanup, we've still got a lot of work to do, but having the new cleanup standard and now being as a plaintiff on the case, we're in the best position we have been for a long time for a better cleanup.
And how is the state, I know the state is involved with this as well as the city, and there was a push to qualify as an environmental disaster, basically. But did that get put on the shelf for now?
Right. So there's essentially a two-front approach to it. Some of the surrounding communities have asked the Federal Environmental Protection Authority, the EPA, to evaluate whether or not this should qualify for the Superfund status, in which case that would trigger one approach to clean up under federal jurisdiction. While that federal approach is going on, the effort that the city's been leading in partnership with Washtenaw County and also the Huron River Watershed Council and some other local actors is to push for a stronger cleanup under our state regulations.
So would you say they're independent of each other right at this stage?
Yes. Yes, either one could be a way to get a stronger cleanup.
And I would think the residents would be very happy to hear about this new step, you know, seeing that it affects not only the quality of their life, but also the value of their property.
Absolutely. Getting that strengthened cleanup standard was a big change, and it's a new judge that's hearing the case who's been very committed to making sure all the parties are engaged. He doesn't want to leave any affected party out. So a new cleanup standard, a new judge. Nothing's for sure when you're dealing with litigation, but I feel like we're in a very good position to get a much improved cleanup than what we've been seeing so far.
So what's the next step now that this judgment has been made?
So the city and the other affected parties continue in negotiation with the judge. Those particular negotiations are confidential, so I can't. Unfortunately, I'd love to be able to share more with the community because I know a lot of people care about the issue, but we're pursuing that judgment and see if we can get what we can get through that approach. Well, at the same time, the EPA is going through their evaluation, and by the end of the year, they should have a preliminary assessment to let us know if their evaluation for the Superfund will continue on to the next stage.
Well, I think it's good for city residents to know that there is a process and they are very involved and it hasn't just stopped.
Absolutely.
The fact that you might not hear the details, but certainly things are going on.
Absolutely.
And they're working on it.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, let's talk about the whole city and how we're also connected to the county, because I know there's a millage vote that's coming up in November. not too far away.
Not too far away at all.
And it's not something that's really a hot topic right now.
Right.
But maybe this is the time we could get into detail with exactly what it involves and why the city at this point, the county, why the county wants to push this, and how does Ann Arbor benefit from this millage?
So starting at the county level, what the county's seeing is there are two challenges that they're facing at the county level that are very tightly linked. One is a public safety challenge, the other is a mental health challenge. What our sheriff's department is seeing, for example, is a lot of the people they're housing at the jail are on psychotropic medication, they're dealing with addiction. Part of the public safety problem that our sheriff's trying to solve is exacerbated by poor access to mental health services. Our county mental health system has faced significant cuts from the state level, which makes it much harder for them to provide even the level of service that they're providing now, much less meet the full need.
All right, let me ask you
Sure
one
thing.
thing. When you say there were state cuts, was this also because of federal cuts? Or was this independent of, was this a state decision to cut back on?
You know, that would be a question that I think the County Board of Commissioners would be able to follow up with the details better. I know that there's been a lot of moving pieces, and one of the things that's been a big ongoing uncertainty with this is with the discussion of another round of health care reform, even the federal funding that is available, what's happening with that. So we've seen state cuts, there's a lot of uncertainty on the federal funding, and the county has a hole to fill. So they're asking voters to support a millage that would fund, at the county level, these two needs, the mental health and the public safety through the sheriff's department. Where the city gets involved is that since Ann Arbor, the city of Ypsilanti, Pittsfield Township, a number of jurisdictions in the county already have their own police forces. They're already spending from their general fund to pay for public safety, but not through the sheriff's department. So communities like Ann Arbor are getting a rebate so that we're made partially whole from these funds.
Now, is this a new millage?
This would be a new millage.
It's not a renewal.
Correct. This would be, voters have to decide for the first time whether or not they want to invest in these services. Since in the city we'd be getting a rebate of a little bit more than $2 million from this millage, what's the best use for us to spend that rebate? And where City Council has said we see the highest priority, the highest unmet need in the city of Ann Arbor, one of those issues is on pedestrian safety. It's been something that's been on
That's been a hot topic for a while.
It really has been. The second has been on affordable housing.
Also another hot topic.
And if you're sleeping under a bridge, that's not public safety, right? And then the third one is climate stability, climate sustainability. So that because if your home is getting flooded because of bigger storms, that's not safe either. So out of that rebate that comes back to the city of Ann Arbor from the county fund, those are the three things where if this moves forward, we'd be able to see a much bigger investment to address some really high priority community needs.
And do you know offhand how long this millage would be in
It would be
effect?
a 10-year millage. The initial proposal was a 10-year millage. I need to just double circle.
Yeah,
There was
it
a
may have
lot of amendments flying
adjusted,
around
yeah.
at the last minute.
And is there any reason for people not to vote for? I mean, in other words, if they don't vote for it and it's not passed, that puts quite a bit of responsibility on the city to come up with funds to take care of these issues, right?
Right. With the fund, if the millage doesn't go through, you'll see two direct impacts. One is our county mental health system is unsustainable without this additional funding. So you're going to see a lot of people who need help not be able to get the help they need.
So you're saying this is really critical?
It really is
at
critical.
this point.
And then for communities that do depend on the sheriff's department to provide their services, they would be seeing a significant increase in their costs. So it could really put a burden on local communities that get the sheriff's department. For the city, we're in a somewhat better position. We aren't depending on these funds for any of our current programs, but these three programs I mentioned to you, those pedestrian safety, housing affordability, and climate sustainability, are three high priority community needs that we haven't been able to fund to the satisfaction of the community. So that's the real opportunity for the city.
And this November election, just to mention, also will include voting for a few council seats as well. There's
Absolutely.
a couple of seats that are coming up.
Yep.
So there'll be a little bit of a city election as well
At
as
the same
county.
time. Yep. We'll have the primaries for the city council in August, so that's going to be an important vote for most of the wards. And then some wards will also have contested races in the November general election. So it's both a county decision and some parts of the city will have a city decision as well.
So that's important for people to know now in August that there is a primary.
Absolutely. And Arbor, because of how democratic this city is, a lot of the decisions are made at that primary. This year it's on August 8th. So in Ward 5, for example, that's when voters will have the chance to decide which Democrat will go on to the November election.
Great. Well, we still have a lot to talk about in terms of the millage and how that connects not only with the issues you mentioned, but also the housing. Maybe when we come back from our break, we can talk a little bit about that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'd love to.
Great. We want to hear from you, so please email us questions to ctn@a2gov.org or tweet us at #CTN in Arbor. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with Ward 5 and Chuck Warpehoski.
Let me ask you a question. What do you value? How about access to your child's education, their football game, their swim meet, their high school musical, their academic future? Does that matter? What about your access to your government, your police, fire, and public safety, parks and recreation activities, state and local officials, the folks you elect to make decisions for your community? Is that worth anything to you? What about your rights, freedom of speech, to communicate your message, to let your voice be heard? That's got to count for something, right? So let me ask you again, what do you value? How about public, educational, and government access television? It belongs to you. Let's keep it that way.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Gabowitz, and this is Ward Talk. We're here with Chuck Warpehoski. I had that down pat before.
You did?
From Ward 5, correct? And we've been talking about the millage that is very involved with Ann Arbor. It's a county millage happening in November election. And we also wanted to talk about what's going on with the city in terms of the pedestrian safety. And that's also tied to the millage in some way?
Right. So already we're putting a lot of resources in terms of our improving crosswalks, putting in better paint and improving that, filling in sidewalks, things like that. So we're doing a lot already, but after some of the fatalities we've seen, we recognize we're not able to make as fast of progress as we would like. So if the millage in November succeeds...
Is that just because there's just so much to do that
Yes.
it's taking more time? It's a slower process?
Yes, and it's not just the time, it's the money, right? So we see, especially by school zones, there's a tremendous desire to have what are called, for example, pedestrian refuge islands, so that as somebody crossing, they don't have to cross all the traffic at once, 2 lanes, 4 lanes or more.
It could be divided up.
Yep, they cross halfway, and then often that goes with a beacon so that cars know there's somebody trying to cross and can stop. Well, they make a tremendous difference for the safety of the kids or whoever's crossing, but they're not cheap. And so the ability to get those in at all of the locations that need them, we're moving as fast as we can. And if the millage goes through in November, we'll be able to go a lot faster because we'll have the money to get those improved crosswalks in place.
And I understand the school areas or zones are of utmost importance. Is that what you're focusing on right now?
Absolutely. We've set out a prioritization model, and we're starting with our schools, especially the high schools and the middle schools. Those tend to be on the busier roads where there's higher speed traffic and higher traffic volumes. So we're improving our crosswalks there. We're working with the school district and the state to declare them school zones, which have the changed speed limits.
Right. And let me just clarify.
Sure.
You have to get federal permission in order to change the speed limit. Is that what you're saying?
So the process of designating a school zone is something that the school district petitions the state for. It's a mess. Some of them are state-owned roads. There's federal regulations that guide all of it. So it's been a very good partnership between the city of Ann Arbor Public Schools, and at times the Michigan Department of Transportation to get these school zones put into place, make sure we've got the right kind of signage, the right kind of crosswalk, the built infrastructure. And the other piece we're spending more of our attention on right now is on educating. That means everybody. It means educating the motorists. It means educating the pedestrians, the bicyclists, making sure everybody's being safe on the roads and sidewalks. And we're also doing the enforcement to make sure that people who are engaging in unsafe and illegal behavior, whether it's running red lights, whether it's blowing through crosswalks, that they're getting that we're paying attention to that and we're holding people accountable.
I know I see the crosswalk. When I'm driving, let's say along Stone School Road, there are several crosswalks, and I often see the driver behind me coming right up to me because they don't know to slow down for the crosswalk. So I think having it well designated and really painted white, I think that really helps too. On the same subject, are you also looking at having more lighting or better lighting in the city?
Absolutely.
That was one of the things you were going to do.
Getting the adequate lighting at those crosswalk locations is definitely important. If it's dark, or even if it's twilight or morning and it's dim, if the car can't see the pedestrian's not safe. So getting that adequate lighting, the beacons, so that even if it's foggy, for example, I remember driving on Plymouth Road and it was just pea soup fog. The only way I knew the pedestrians were there was they pushed those flashing yellow lights. It made people a lot safer. So all of those elements of the infrastructure can really go a long way to help keep people safe.
Now, I believe there's some new regulation about driving so many feet, staying a distance of bicyclists It's, 8 feet or something
5
like
feet.
that? Oh, 5 feet. Well,
5
that's
feet.
better than 8 feet.
Yeah.
And how does the city get the word out and educate people
Mm-hmm.
about that particular rule? Because we have so many
Right.
people riding a bike these
Absolutely.
days.
I rode my bike here. So we go on Ward Talk and we talk to you and make sure that everybody knows about it. So that issue of making sure people are educated about all the rules of the road is an ongoing challenge. That's part of the work we're doing with the schools, for example, and we're looking at how can we better get the message out on these safety behaviors. So that education part of it is ongoing, such as, and the vulnerable road user ordinance, it applies to bikes, but it also applies to construction workers. It applies if there's a firefighter or police officer in the roadway. You know, sometimes people in wheelchairs, if there's not a sidewalk, they need to walk in the road. It applies to them too, or roll in the road. So any vulnerable user, that 5-foot buffer applies to make sure that there's enough of a cushion that they're safe on the roadway.
Will any signs be put up at all?
On the 5-foot, I'm not aware of any signs for that, but our communications people are looking at ways to help people on that.
Because I think what might be confusing is that there is a bicycle lane. For instance, when I drive on Ellsworth, there's a bicycle lane, and it's a narrow strip. And then, of course, we have our car lane.
Right.
But if I have to be 5 feet away, that bicycle lane really widens. So
Right.
that's why I was wondering if signs would eventually be going
Yeah.
up.
One of the things we're looking at, and this ties in sometimes with safety, they talk about the 3 main E's: engineering, education, and enforcement. So how can we educate people about the rules and how to be safe drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians? How do we enforce those rules? But then also, how do we build our transportation system to make it easy for people to do the right thing? One of the things we are looking at doing more of is what are called buffered bike lanes, where it can just be some paint, but you paint in that space to say, okay, here's the bike lane, and now we're going to put some cross hatching to give that buffer so that the cyclist isn't riding right up on that white line right next to the traffic. There's a little bit more breathing space. It's going to help you follow the road, the rules as a driver. It's going to help the cyclist stay out of harm's way. So building in some of those engineered solutions is part of how we change driver behavior.
Right. Good. Well, we'll be following this for a while. Also, the housing, which is always a topic, but again, what do you foresee can be improved? What's happening with the city council in terms
Right.
of helping that along?
Yeah. So we are in the process of, a couple years ago, we approved an affordable housing and equity recommendation saying we want to add about 3,000 units of affordable housing over the next 20 years. It was a big, ambitious goal, and we're just starting it. We've picked up a few units here and a few units there. We've got some that are in the pipeline, but we're not yet at the scale where we're going to be close to hitting that goal. That's why things like having that county millage that would help us fund some of our housing affordability needs is so important. We've also been working with people in Lansing, legislators on both sides of the aisle in Lansing, to give us some more tools in our toolbox to make it easier to have voluntary developer incentives, for example, to say, okay, we'll change the parking requirements or do something like that if you put in some affordable units.
So this is not something you can require of any builder that wants to build. You can't tell them, you have to have a certain percentage of units that are for, affordable housing.
If it's a privately owned lot on private land, we can't require it at all. If we're selling city-owned land, we can make that part of the sale. The other thing we can do, and we're working on this, for example, at the Lower Town site, is that site is polluted. We need to get the pollution cleaned up before anybody can build on it. We can use what's called a brownfield authority to help fund eligible expenses like cleanup or infrastructure, and we can work with the developer to make affordable housing contingent on that brownfield funding. So it's a way to help the developer meet his or her goals about being able to get a site cleaned and funded, and help the city meet its goals about environmental cleanup and housing affordability. So we've got some of those tools, but the state legislature could make it a lot easier for us. This legislature is not going to let us require it, but they could make it easier for us to incentivize it.
And what's the time frame of getting this decision made?
You know, with the state legislature, it's always a challenge. So to make a prediction on what's going to happen there. The other part of this, I would say, though, is that goal of 3,000 new units, that's for people who are low income. They're making below about 60% of the area median income. Sorry to throw out the jargon there. But people who are making decent professional incomes are still having a hard time paying for rent. Even, you know, teachers, secretaries, baristas.
What they call the workforce.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we're never going to be able to subsidize people in those middle income workforce units, but part of my belief is that part of the solution to that housing affordability challenge for people who are have those jobs is it's supply and demand. If we don't expand our supply of housing, Ann Arbor's a very attractive community to live in. People who can pay are just going to keep bidding up the price of housing on the few units that are here. If we can expand the supply, it's going to help cool that price pressure and help Ann Arbor stay a more economically diverse community. If we stop building units, we're going to become less and less economically diverse.
And do we have any land right now that's on the market that you're looking to sell?
The city has a couple of parcels that we would be able to sell. There aren't currently plans on how we would do that. There's discussion. The parking lot behind Connor O'Neill's, for example, the city owns that. This parking lot on the corner of 4th and Catherine over by the farmer's market, the city owns that. So there's been discussion here and there about selling those or putting housing on them, but there hasn't been a final decision or even the beginning of a formal process to make that happen.
Okay. But in the future, it looks like you do have opportunity to be able to offer the more affordable housing.
We have some opportunities on city-owned land, either by putting affordable housing there or selling the land and using the revenue to build affordable housing somewhere where the land might be cheaper in the city of Ann Arbor. And the trade-off between those is still an active discussion. We don't have enough land under city control to meet that 3,000 unit goal. So to meet that goal, we're also going to need to find ways to incentivize affordable housing on privately owned land.
Well, we'll certainly be following this issue for a while. Would you believe the time is out?
That was fast.
Our half hour is gone, so I want to thank you so much for updating us on what's going on, and we'll certainly, I just want to say, I know this is short notice, but I'm looking forward to the art fair coming up, and certainly in August we'll be looking at the primaries,
August
so
8th,
we still have things going on this summer.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you. This has been a joy. Thank you so
Great.
much, Bonnie.
Remember to join us for a new episode every third Wednesday of the month. We want to hear from you, so please email us at ctn@a2gov.org. Attention, Word Talk. You can also follow CTN and ask questions on Twitter at twitter.com/CTN in Arbor. We'll make sure to include your questions. For Word Talk, I'm Bonnie Gabowitz. Until next month.